Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to Talking March Madness with your one and only Miguel Mike Medina and your other one and only Avery Jones. Avery, how you doing? How's it going?
It's going great, Miguel. We found out the 68 teams hoping to vie for a national title Sunday. The bracket looks very stacked. You have teams that are excited to be in. Championship week was madness in and of itself. I'm wearing my Hogwarts sweater because even though it's March Madness, a little magic in March is going to be needed for a lot of these teams as well.
Yes, indeed. And as you know, every single year, you had teams that get left out and teams that you feel that were unfairly to get in. The Big East. The Big East got left out. My St. John's got left out. And it's crazy because before St. John's went on the 6-game winning streak, Rick Pitino publicly called out his team before they responded with a 6-game winning streak. And then that ended with UConn beating them in the semifinals. St. John's went to the semifinals in the Big East tournament for the first time since 2000. They had the fifth 20-win season in the last 2 decades. Most Big East wins since 2010, 2011. They were 6-1 in the last 7 games. And you mean to tell me you couldn't slide them in there? So that was one. Seton Hall got left out. Providence got left out. A lot of people feel that Michigan State didn't deserve to get in the tournament. So Tom Izzo history continues of going into the NCAA tournament. So yeah, it's been crazy. Kentucky, they ended up as the number 3 seed. They will play Oakland in the first round matchup. So, and Kentucky could face either the number 6 seed Texas Tech or number 11 seed NC State. Shout out to NC State. As a North Carolina fan and St. John's fan, I got to give credit. NC State, their first NCAA title in 37 years. So shout out to them, but Kentucky could face either one of them in the second round. What are your thoughts?
You're right, Miguel. I was hoping you would mention some of the snubs that happened in the selection process, and I completely agree with you. St. John's and Providence got to the Big East semifinals. I was really hoping, if not both, at least one of those teams would get in, and St. John's and Providence were left out, as well as Seton Hall. Just like you said, NC State, they won the ACC title. They beat Duke in order to do it. I'm a Duke fan myself. Let's talk about surprises. One of the surprises that always intrigues me for March Madness are the number 1 seeds. And you mentioned North Carolina getting a number 1 seed. Also Purdue, Houston, and UConn. UConn, of course, are the defending champions. But with these number 1 seeds, you also have to be careful. In the past couple of years, a 16 seed has knocked off a number 1. It even happened to Purdue last year. So Purdue, hoping to make the best of a very productive season. They did not make it to their championship game this previous week, but they still got the number 1 seed. So hopefully they're looking for at least a Sweet 16, maybe even a Final Four. You did mention North Carolina, but I would also like to mention Tennessee. Tennessee is the number 2 seed in the Midwest, and you're looking at them possibly playing Texas or Virginia or Colorado State. North Carolina, of course, a frequent rival of the Duke Blue Devils. So I look to see North Carolina and Tennessee in the SEC making some big waves there. But you always have to, when you look at these brackets that we always print out, that, we always make numerous of them, you always look for your upsets. So even mentioning my favorite team, Duke, they're ranked number 3, but they're going to be opening the tournament against Vermont. So you can't count out a school that's just happy to be there. Some of these teams, when they're so happy to be there, that's when the key gets turned. That's when the excitement, the pride for their school, the pride for their team, for their teammates comes out, and you can see some really interesting games in this tournament, especially even the first 4 games. You're looking at Howard Wagner, Colorado State, Virginia, Grambling, Montana State, and Colorado Boise State. So even the first 4 games to get into the round of 64 is interesting. And then once those 64 games start, you're looking for an even more impressive first round of teams to start the tournament.
Yes, indeed. And we love seeing new teams, new stories, make an impact every year on March Madness. We've seen Butler in 2010, St. Peter's recently. It's that's why we love March Madness. March Madness is just amazing. There's a matchup that excites me that it could happen for a Sweet 16, and that's Gonzaga and Purdue. Gonzaga and Purdue have a chance to face off at the Sweet 16. Also, Creighton and Tennessee have a chance to face off in Sweet 16. So, but we just never too sure. We're never too sure when it comes to March Madness.
You're absolutely right. It's funny you mentioned St. Mary's. St. Mary's is going to open against Grand Canyon, and Grand Canyon popped into the scene the mid of this year, making a top 25 seed as well. So look for Grand Canyon to make a very interesting play for their first round. Other teams that interest me is Nebraska and Texas A&M. That's an 8 and 9 seed, and usually those games are very, very close. They don't count them as an upset, but also great potential for what could be once you get to the second round and once you get to the Sweet 16. Another interesting game is South Carolina and Oregon. These are some really great teams that had some really interesting level seasons. You had some very ups and downs for a lot of seasons. A lot of include any team that was a number 1 this season literally was only number 1 for maybe a week, and then they lost. So you're going to see a lot of teams that, when given a chance, possibly even teams that critics will say, oh, they don't have a chance, or once you get the odds makers involved, they say they're going to lose by 10 points or 15 points, and then all of a sudden they play these really defensive games, these fantastic games. And what we saw in championship week, we saw some of these games go into overtime. We saw some games be won by impossible shots or last second layups. So I look to see some of those too in the first round as well as the second round. If I were going to say, who could be on upset alert, I actually would go for Auburn, who is going to play the University of Alabama Birmingham. That's in first round of the East. Also, I mentioned Grand Canyon, St. Mary's. Grand Canyon is a 12th seed. St. Mary's is a 5. So St. Mary's needs to be very careful when it comes to the underdogs, if you will. In the South, I have to say it, I do look at Vermont as 13 and Duke is number 4. Granted, this is a new era for the Duke Blue Devils without Coach Mike Krzyzewski, but I still believe that Duke still has the blueprint and the pedigree that they can get to, I'm hoping, a Sweet 16. And in the Midwest, you did mention Gonzaga, and I'm intrigued too. TCU at number, I'm sorry, not TCU Gonzaga. I'm talking about Creighton and Akron. Akron is a 14 seed, and Creighton is a number 3. Creighton, they lost to Providence in the Big East tournament, and like we said, Creighton got in, but Providence didn't. So Creighton wants to look to maybe possibly avenge what could have been a Big East national title against UConn. And hopefully, maybe they can get to the Final Four or possibly the national championship game. But this is going to be an interesting tournament, not only for the teams wanting to get in for that first four, the teams that are in and just waiting to play starting tomorrow and Wednesday. So this shapes up to be a really great tournament. And like a lot of fans of college basketball, I'm ready for some upsets because that's the best part of March Madness is who is going to get upset. And lastly, if I was just looking at the number one seeds, I think the first number one seed to go down, and please forgive me for saying it, it's probably going to be Purdue. Purdue has a lot to prove this tournament. They were a number one seed last year. They did not get out of the first round. So this still may be weighing on their mind, but I hope they prove me wrong. Purdue had a fantastic season this year, probably one of the more productive of the four number one seeds. So I see the one number one seed on upset alert is Purdue.
Now, tomorrow is the first four games of this tournament. We have the number 16 Wagner versus number 16 Howard, which we play at 6:40 p.m. on True TV. And we also have the number 10 seed Colorado State versus number 10 seed Virginia at 9:10 p.m. on True TV. So those are two matchups that excites me because you don't rarely hear about them. So I won't give a prediction just yet. But these are two matchups that we got to keep an eye on, see how they will flourish to start this tournament.
I agree with you. The first four games for teams to enter the tournament are very intriguing because once a team gets in and now they go for a national title, the momentum is all theirs for the taking. So those first two games, like you mentioned, Howard versus Wagner and Colorado State versus Virginia, very interesting. I'd very I'm very intrigued to keep an eye out for that Virginia team. That Virginia basketball team over the past couple of years have had some ups and downs, but I look to see them being very fierce against Colorado State. Howard, who got in, they want to keep the ball rolling for their tournament hopes as well. So those first two games for the first four, very intriguing.